Tonight, we are witnessing something that intelligence analysts once bracketed under low probability, high consequence. And yet, here we are. In the early hours before dawn, Ukraine revealed a capability many in Moscow dismissed as fantasy. Not a superweapon, not a Hollywood invention, but a technological leap so unexpected, so destabilizing, that even Russia's own war planners are now using one word, the word they rarely utter in public: unprepared. And for Vladimir Putin, this morning began like every other in a conflict he once believed he controlled. By nightfall, it ended as one of the most disorienting days of his presidency. Tuto, we begin in the thin gray light before sunrise. Air raid sirens had not yet sounded in Russia's Belgorod region. Communications logs later showed a burst of encrypted Ukrainian traffic at Zoel 4014. 12 minutes later, something flew north out of Dnipro Oblast, something no Russian radar could identify. It moved low, weaving unpredictably. Military analysts describe its flight path like a heartbeat on a cardiograph: erratic, alive, impossible to pattern. Within 10 minutes, it crossed the border, undetected. Witnesses near Gubkin first mistook the sound for a passing jet. It wasn't. By the time Russian air defenders realized what they were chasing, the object had already struck a logistics coordination hub, one tying together supply routes feeding Russia's operations in eastern Ukraine. Then came two more strikes. Then silence. Not silence of peace, but the silence of disbelief. 2 hours later, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense confirmed what Western intelligence had only speculated about: the Kobzar System, a domestically engineered hypersonic-grade strike platform. Its name, drawn from the Ukrainian word for a traditional poet-musician, carried symbolism that was no accident. It suggested storytelling through power, Ukraine writing its own narrative in the sky. Unlike imported missile platforms, this was fully native. Built quietly, tested in isolated corridors, its digital signature erased from every open satellite pass. For months, Western analysts had debated odd spikes in energy consumption outside Lviv, unexplained cargo movements under night camouflage. Now those breadcrumbs added up. The revelation landed like thunder on Moscow's marble floors. Two inside Russia's General Staff headquarters, intercepted chatter captured bewilderment. One voice, believed to belong to a colonel in the Aerospace Defense Forces, muttered, "We did not even have a track." Pasa. That single sentence will haunt Russian intelligence for years to come. Because if you can't track what hits you, you don't understand how to stop it. For 2 years, Russia's doctrine had rested on overwhelming Ukraine through attrition. Grind their defenses bit by bit until exhaustion did the rest. That strategy presumed technological superiority and predictability. Tonight, both melted away. 2. In Washington, the response was cautious but undeniably impressed. Pentagon briefers described the strike as a manifestation of extreme innovation under duress. London called it a historic reversal of expectation. Paris, characteristic as ever, worded their admiration poetically: Ukraine has turned necessity into imagination and imagination into precision. But behind diplomatic restraint, Western officials were privately astonished. Few had expected Ukraine to achieve such sophistication without external assistance. One NATO analyst confessed to a BBC producer off record, "We underestimated their engineers. They redefined the battlefield faster than procurement cycles can even blink." What made the Kobzar system different was not just speed. It was strategy encoded into hardware. Each missile carried an onboard adaptive algorithm that altered flight paths based on detected radar sweeps. Traditional air defenses rely on predictive expectations. This craft rewrote them in real time. Its builders used commercial microprocessors. Civilian components repurposed for military logic. Ingenious, cheap, unpredictable. It made traditional countermeasures obsolete because you cannot anticipate what is designed never to repeat the same pattern. Russian radar operators likened the waveform to a ghost in static. One technician, exhausted after an 11-hour scramble, compared it to chasing smoke with a net. Shoo! But tonight's developments are not merely about hardware, they're about psychology. Ukraine's act was more than battlefield pragmatism. It was narrative dominance. By striking deep into Russian soil, without Western intermediaries, Ukraine delivered a statement. We are no longer fighting for survival. We are fighting with sophistication. For Putin, accustomed to controlling every frame of theater, this inversion is intolerable. The same machinery of propaganda that once depicted Ukraine as naive and dependent now faces an impossible script rewrite. 7 hours passed before Russia's state television even acknowledged the event. When it finally did, the tone was strained, the language oddly hesitant. A unidentified projectile, possibly of Western origin. They couldn't bring themselves to say Ukrainian origin, but the satellite data doesn't lie. Every path, every timestamp points to Kyiv's ingenuity. Behind the circuitry and strategy lies another story, one of human endurance. The architects of Kobzar worked largely underground, quite literally. Engineers from destroyed research institutes relocated to subterranean workshops. Power constraints meant nights of half-lit soldering, improvising with scavenged machinery. A 27-year-old systems designer, known to colleagues only as Lyra, led the software team. When asked months earlier what kept her working through constant blackouts, she said, "Because somewhere out there, someone is telling their child we will lose. I want to prove them wrong." That spirit, unyielding, inventive, defiant, fueled every line of code that guided those missiles across the border this morning. Inside the Kremlin compound tonight, aides describe mood swings oscillating between fury and denial. Putin convened a closed session of the Security Council mid-afternoon, emerging unsmiling and offering only a short pre-scripted comment: any aggression toward Russian territory will receive the appropriate response. The lack of elaboration spoke volumes. Behind him, the real conversation was less composed. Leaked snippets from military communicators hinted at circular blame. Defense industries blaming intelligence analysts, analysts blaming electronic warfare units, and generals warning of systemic informational corrosion. That is bureaucratic code for panic. The old certainty that whatever Ukraine attempted, Russia could preempt has evaporated. By evening, Russian social media broke through state filters to discuss what officials refused to name. Telegram channels once pledged to patriotic fervor now fill with uneasy humor. Memes of the invisible ghost from Kiev appeared faster than censors could delete them. This is the subtle crack that worries the Kremlin most, the erosion of the myth of invulnerability. When laughter begins to replace fear, control begins to slip. In Beijing, statements were careful. In Ankara, measured. But quietly, allied intelligence networks across Europe exchanged notes suggesting that Ukraine's technological progress outsprinted even optimistic projections. One European diplomat describing the geopolitical tectonic said simply, "This war has just entered its software age." Because what Ukraine proved is not just capacity, but adaptability. You can throttle supply chains, you can sanction metals, but you cannot sanction creativity. Here is Moscow's impossible equation: retaliate too broadly and risk isolating remaining allies, do nothing and signal weakness. For a leader whose power rests on appearing all-powerful, both options are intolerable. Defensive reconfiguration has already begun. Satellite imagery shows sudden redeployment of S-400 batteries around the Bryansk and Kursk regions. Fuel convoys are shifting routes. Insider reports suggest early mobilization of reserve units, not to advance, but to guard. This reversal from offensive confidence to defensive anxiety is the subtext of every message radiating out of Moscow tonight. The hunter blinking as it realizes the prey can now see in the dark. In Kiev, the tone is controlled optimism. Government spokespeople avoid overt celebration, insisting the operation's tactical objectives were limited. But citizens understand what limitation really means in this context. It means message delivered. Cafes that had been dark during winter blackouts glowed with soft light as power returned, and impromptu toasts echoed quietly for ingenuity, for survival. For once, the breaking news favored their side. Two interviews with Western intelligence officials reveal that Ukraine's secrecy protocols rivaled Cold War spycraft. Documents printed once, read by hand, then burned. Digital simulations run offline. Even Allied observers were kept compartmentalized, each seeing only fragments of the bigger picture. That tight operational discipline is rare even among NATO members. For a country under invasion, it's extraordinary. One senior U.S. analyst described it as a masterclass in operational security made possible by existential motivation. Simply put, when survival is the incentive, efficiency becomes instinct. Two technical assessments from independent labs confirmed the 3 strikes this morning disabled a supply coordination network supporting at least 4 Russian divisions along the Eastern Front. Communication relays, gone. Fuel reserves ignited. Command nodes, offline. Measured conservatively, the disruption could slow Russian logistics by weeks. Add Ukraine's ongoing counter-battery campaigns, and the result is a battlefield suddenly tilted out of symmetry. For the first time in months, Russia must reassess its vulnerability, not along predictable lines of confrontation, but across its own rear. War today is fought not only on terrain or airspace, but in minds. What matters most in this moment is perception. Who appears adaptable, who appears stagnant. The Kobzar strikes achieved something intangible yet powerful. They made Russian officers imagine vulnerability where none existed yesterday. That imagined weakness spreads faster than intelligence reports. In military psychology, this is known as displacement of confidence. Once it begins, it corrodes planning, communication, and morale. A missile may destroy a depot, but fear destroys structure. Observers tonight are already drawing parallels with moments when small states overturned massive forces through cleverness. The Finnish Winter War's ski commandos, Israel's 1967 preemptive strike, Britain's code-breaking at Bletchley Park. Ukraine's innovation stands in that lineage. Proof that intellect, not tonnage, defines modern dominance. But there's a deeper historical rhythm here too. A war once engineered to erase a nation's identity has ended up energizing it with creative purpose. Every new Ukrainian invention becomes an act of cultural survival. Within Russian state media, cracks appear. Anchors usually fierce turn subdued, repeating phrases like complex situation and ongoing analysis. Those are euphemisms for we don't know what happened. Pro-Kremlin bloggers, meanwhile, alternate between denial and conspiracy, some insisting the strike was fake, others alleging Western sabotage. But the contradicting narratives only amplify disarray. In information warfare, coherence is power. Tonight, coherence belongs to Kiev. Behind every gleaming technological headline lies the painful arithmetic of war-injured soldiers, displaced civilians, anxious families waiting under sirens. Nothing in tonight's revelation diminishes that. Yet it reminds the world why those sacrifices are made. The pursuit of agency, of self-determination. Even through rubble, agency shines like a relay beacon across time. Ukraine's engineers may have built a missile, but they also built a message that even amid ruin, creation persists. Strategically, 3 outcomes dominate think tank simulations tonight. As Scenario 1M, Russia escalates, perhaps using cyber offensives or long-range missiles to intimidate. As X Scenario 2, Russia retreats tactically to buy time for countermeasure development. Scenario 3, an uneasy stalemate where innovation races against desperation. Each has costs. None return Russia to psychological dominance. 2 leaked communications, authenticated by multiple agencies, reveal internal Kremlin language describing Ukraine's new missiles as temporary irritation. But the tone, analysts note, was less confident than intended. For a government trained in projection, insecurity sometimes leaks through syntax. Every empire has a tell. Tonight, Russia's is hesitation. Beyond the battlefield, Ukraine's breakthrough redefines global defense logic. It demonstrates that 21st century power may no longer depend on industrial mass, but on creative elasticity. That insight resonates far beyond Eastern Europe, from Taiwan's defense planners to Baltic cybersecurity units. Because what Ukraine proved is that deterrence now wears new clothes. Half engineer's smock, half hacker's hoodie. Wars are decided not solely by tanks rolling, but by minds adapting faster than bureaucracy. For Ukraine's allies, tonight's news creates both celebration and uncertainty. Supporters rejoice at proof that assistance yielded independence. But policymakers worry what happens if Ukrainian capability overtakes diplomatic guardrails. In short, when students outpace teachers, classrooms get nervous. Still, official communiques are overwhelmingly positive. The subtext, if Ukraine can strike alone, Western resources can pivot from emergency relief to strategic partnership. It's the military equivalent of watching someone you once helped now sprint past you. Gratifying and humbling all at once. Two sources close to the Kremlin paint tonight's portrait of a man privately furious, but publicly cautious. For a leader whose legitimacy rests on projection of omnipotence, embarrassment is kryptonite. History may record this as the evening the myth of inevitability fractured. Putin built his regime on guaranteeing Russians that he foresees every threat, foreign, domestic, even metaphysical. Now, a neighboring country that once bought its radar chips from Moscow has out-engineered his entire defense apparatus. That is political humiliation wrapped in technological awe. Already, subtle conversations are surfacing across Russian institutions. Defense universities whisper about curriculum reforms. Young engineers, long stifled by outdated doctrine, murmur about emigration. Even oligarchs privately query investments abroad. One leak reportedly captures a senior energy magnate saying, "If they built that in a blackout, imagine what they'll build with stable power." Gas. The irony is cutting. Russia's attempt to crush innovation next door has detonated innovation at its own foundation. 2. Kiev officials insist that the Kobzar demonstration was S-measured. The implication, there's more in reserve. Whether that's bluff or truth matters less than the perception, because perception itself is power. A single strike can force an adversary to spend billions recalibrating defenses. In asymmetric warfare, creating expensive fear is as effective as inflicting direct damage. This is chess played with circuitry. Every move forcing the opponent to rebuild the board. Too interestingly, tonight's breakthrough echoes through art as much as policy. Ukrainian musicians released spontaneous tributes, street murals appeared depicting engineers in flight helmets. The fusion of defense and culture, of resilience becoming aesthetic, is uniquely modern. It converts survival into national identity. One Kiev journalist described the atmosphere succinctly, not triumphalism. Determination wearing a smile. Oh, in a rare recorded briefing, Ukraine's deputy defense minister thanked the science brigades, a term previously unknown to the public. These are interdisciplinary crews of physicists, programmers, and machinists operating beneath the usual military hierarchy. They function like startups inside a war zone. Rapid iteration, minimal bureaucracy. Think Silicon Valley ethos under artillery fire. Tonight's success is validation of that model. As one researcher noted, when peace returns, this will be our new industry, solving hard problems fast. Every capital calculating tonight understands that a precedent has been set. An underdog state, through decentralized innovation, neutralized an aggressor's technical monopoly. That lesson will shape conflicts far removed from this geography. Energy analysts even suggest it might accelerate Western supply chains toward Ukrainian partnerships. Imagine a post-war economy anchored not just in rebuilding, but in exporting resilience. Tutu, our correspondents describe surround Moscow's mode unusually empty, offices lit at midnight. Chauffeurs idling without orders. The sense of suspended breath. In these corridors, silence is not peace, it's recalibration. The data centers hum louder than conversation. Somewhere, code breakers and radar analysts race to simulate what hit them. Leaders who once mocked Ukraine's engineers as Google technicians with soldering irons now desperately study their methods. Irony doesn't begin to cover it. Consider the symbolism. A weapon named after the Kobzari, the wandering poets who, centuries ago, carried history through song when books were forbidden. By choosing that name, Ukraine bound modern technology to ancient storytelling. The missile's trajectory thus became metaphor, a cultural verse written across enemy skies. Where Russia sought erasure, Ukraine answers with creation. There's poetry even in propulsion. Two military analysts predict Russia will pursue rapid counter-innovation, recalibrating radar arrays, drafting emergency budgets. But innovation born of panic rarely matches innovation born of purpose. Meanwhile, Ukraine expands its strategy, combining cyber operations, drone swarms, and intelligence deception into synchronized waves. The warfare of adaptation continues, and the world watches, aware that this moment may define how smaller nations confront larger aggressors for decades. Out near Kharkiv, I spoke to a soldier named Ilya through Secure Feed earlier today. He smiled wryly when asked about the new weapon. It means maybe the next supply truck won't reach them on time, he said. It means we move without guessing if help will come. We built our own help. His words, simple and quiet, explain everything strategic briefings cannot. Within hours, major outlets lit up. The Economist described a new balance of ingenuity. Le Monde titled it The Algorithm War. And here at home, viewers tuned in to watch live analysis stretch late into the night. Because the battlefield may be far away, but the implications reach every democracy watching authoritarianism tested and found vulnerable. To analysts warn, do not assume restraint. Historical precedent shows Putin equates embarrassment with threat. Escalation, whether cyber or conventional, remains possible. Thus, as we discuss ingenuity, vigilance remains crucial. Moscow could revert to narratives framing the strike as existential Western conspiracy. Propaganda thrives on reframing humiliation as martyrdom. Expect that in coming days. But facts remain stubborn, and technology, once unveiled, cannot be wished back into non-existence. Kiev's media strategy follows a new doctrine: controlled transparency. Enough truth to inspire allies, enough mystery to unnerve enemies. Tonight's public statement contained carefully measured details, range confirmed, mechanism unspecified. This balance maintains tension, essential in information warfare. Every unanswered question inside the Kremlin is a quiet Ukrainian success. Economic markets reacted subtly yet meaningfully. Russian defense bonds slipped. European defense stocks climbed. Investors, reading between headlines, recognized that technological agility had shifted from east to west across the Dnieper. War, grim as it is, remains tied to economies. Tonight, innovation traded better than intimidation. Step back, what symbolizes this moment? A nation once expected to collapse has built tools that redefine modern combat. That is not simply political victory, it's philosophical vindication. That freedom, however under siege, breeds smarter survival. Authoritarianism stifles curiosity because it fears questions. Democracies, even war-weary ones, survive because they invite them. Ukraine's invention is thus democratic logic executed through circuitry. As night stretches over both Kiev and Moscow, listeners might imagine the glow of screens. The adrenaline drained but determination intact. Somewhere, an engineer checks diagnostics. Somewhere, a radar officer reviews errors. Somewhere, leaders on both sides weigh next moves. The war pauses rarely, but tonight carries a strange stillness, both relief and reckoning. Power, as tonight reminds us, is not possession but perception. You are powerful only until someone demonstrates they can out-imagine you. Russia built an empire on control. Ukraine is dismantling it with creativity. And there lies the paradox of this air steel may hold territory, but ideas shape time. This broadcast opened with a word, unprepared. It will end with another, unpredictable. Because unpredictability is now Ukraine's strategic advantage. Not chaos, but ingenuity in motion. Vladimir Putin imagined a war of domination. Ukraine turned it into a contest of innovation. That transformation, more than any missile, may reshape the century itself. So tonight, as we watch the horizon of Eastern Europe flicker with the cold light of a new phase, remember this: control in war, as in history, always belongs to whoever learns faster. And tonight, without question, Ukraine has learned faster. The story continues tomorrow, and we will be here tracking every cipher, every silence, every sudden spark that tells us where this conflict goes next.